Oh, hello there. We've been busy working on our Las Vegas Chris Tucker stand-up review, as well as working on our Rush Hour 3 review. But with the remake of Roadhouse dropping over the last week, we decided to take a breather from this Chris Tucker review saga, and then focus on revisiting a classic, as well as the shit show of a remake that just came out about it. Today, we talk about Roadhouse 1989 and Roadhouse 2024. Welcome to Abaddon Video. So when you think of Roadhouse, the 1989 version, all that really comes to mind is Patrick Swayze beating the shit out of a bunch of drunks and assholes. The movie could easily be summarized as an action flick where we see Patrick Swayze portray a man named Dalton, who's a bouncer for hire at bars. And this guy does not take any shit. He's the real deal despite his small and petite size. The movie doesn't use any of that CGI shit, as it contains real-life explosions and fires that were used on set. And this movie is littered with fight choreography. Not to mention that the amount of sugar glass that this production must have used is astrofucking-nomical. With this movie being a classic, I'm not going to go play by play as I would reviewing most films, because most of you have probably already seen this and have already heard this before. But I will touch on what I thought really stood out to me for this being my first time viewing the film. My favorite part of the film was the presence of Sam Elliott, but I think that's just because he's the narrator of one of my favorite films of all time, The Big Lebowski. Throughout the movie, they referred to him as Old Man, and I think he was about in his mid to late 40s when they filmed this. Which is kind of freaking crazy because he's been playing an old man since his mid 40s, and this was 35 years ago. I honestly thought that Dalton's love interest, the doctor lady, was a fucking toothpick. I'm thinking to myself throughout the movie, oh, they're having sex now? Jesus Christ, he's about to get another kill. He's gonna break her in half. Did they not have sandwiches in the late 80s? The movie had a pretty much pure white cast, but based off the setting and the time that it took place in, it's kind of understandable. But shout out to Ernie, the black bartender they hired after they fired that one guy. I thought this movie was pretty overhyped at first. You know, Patrick Swayze just going into a bar and trying to clean up all the attitudes and beat up a bunch of fucking drunks. But about halfway through, this shit starts getting fucking crazy. It seems that the villains have a pretty hard time getting under Dalton's skin until they start fucking with all the people around him that he seems to start to care about. Now, like, all of a sudden, Patrick Swayze's ripping out fucking throats and returning the fucking corpses across the pond like he's some sort of aquatic delivery service. And this leads to all-out fucking war between a French cunt and a fucking bouncer. And this fucking guy definitely deserved what he had coming to him. Who the fuck performs the act of arson, watches the shit explode, and then drives away on a dirt bike hysterically laughing? Bro, you're not fucking discreet at all. The fuck? And then the climax of this scene is when this guy drops the fucking bomb and says,
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.
There is a very subtle hint of gayness in this film that must be noted, as most of the time we're staring at Patrick Swayze with his shirt off. And then this guy drops that fucking bomb. Who would drop that in a fucking fight? My opponent would start laughing at me if I told them that. The main villain, the rich cunt, has some sort of god complex going on, and it's so humbling to see him get fucked up in that last scene. I mean, up until this point, we've seen him disrupt businesses, burn shit to the ground. He fucking even took a monster truck and drove right through a Ford dealership. And this is in the 80s. This is before the Japanese had pretty much taken over the automotive industry in America, so that's like a big blow to the fucking die-hard Americans out there. The townsfolk are definitely pissed. This guy's even boasting about bringing J.C. Penney to town. J.C. fucking Penney. Are they even still around today? Oh, yeah, they are. They are. We have a plot where this crazy capitalist cunt has fucking so much money and power and authority over the town that he's pretty much bought out all the cops to the point where he's got free roam. Throughout the film, we see a lot of callbacks to jokes, like, for instance, when addressing Patrick Swayze's size, a lot of people say, "I thought you would be bigger," considering that he has a reputation of beating all of his opponents and kicking their asses and being a tough guy when he's such a small figure. And the other joke is, "You have insurance, right, bud?" In referring to all the outcomes of the rich cunt's escapades through town abusing his power. They rather deal with an insurance claim than actually deal with the problem itself. And this actually helps build character for Patrick Swayze because Dalton realizes that nothing in this town's gonna change unless he's that guy to fucking make it happen. This guy went from showing up just to clean up a bar to cleaning up a whole fucking town. Shit, give this guy the whole salary of the police department for fuck's sake. The final showdown of this film delivers as we see each one of this rich cunt's goons get fucking taken out in a beautiful way, getting exactly what they deserve. Except the fat guy. He just gets a fucking polar bear thrown on him and, I guess, sympathy. Even though he was kind of a cunt the whole film as well. But I guess he does redeem himself a little bit there at the end when he states that he didn't see shit in regards to Dalton coming in and murdering everyone on that fucking estate. After watching the original Roadhouse, I began to understand why people love and appreciate this film so much. The acting is superb, the characters are believable, and every single actor is committing 100%, which leaves us as viewers to really despise certain characters and root for the other character. And after watching this, I don't think this movie needed a sequel, or even a reboot. But someone out there thought fucking otherwise. Now, we're not gonna talk about that 2006 Roadhouse 2 straight-to-DVD fucking nonsense of a film. Nope, not today. What we're gonna talk about is the 2024 reboot, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor. This film opens up with a chubby, shirtless Post Malone beating the shit out of another man in like a circle pit at like a bar style, like a Fight Club type situation. And let me just tell you, the fucking CGI here of the sweat coming off the guy's face as he's pummeling him is awful. I like Post Malone's music, don't get me wrong, but these little cameos I've seen him in movies really haven't done it for me yet. And then walks in our version of Dalton, a jacked Jake Gyllenhaal, who has a clear reputation because Post Malone gets right the fuck out of there. Dalton doesn't even have to fight and gets paid for the win. Total dub. He's approached in the parking lot by that lady from the fucking Daily Show. Really? And it turns out that she is the bar owner that wants to contract Dalton to come down to the Florida Keys or wherever the fuck it takes place in to help clean up her bar. Already, I'm getting the vibe that this is not going to be a good movie. We see Dalton take a knife stab early in the film here, which is kind of trying to establish his toughness and character, as well as mimicking the opening scene from the original Roadhouse, where Swayze gets sliced in the shoulder. But in this time, Jake takes one in the tummy. After a long period of thinking and chilling on the train tracks with his shitty-ass car, Dalton thinks, hey, maybe I shouldn't fucking park here, and then just barely gets off the train tracks before the train plows through his shitty car. The movie then cuts to Dalton arriving in the Keys to go to the Roadhouse, and we find out how the Roadhouse got its stupid fucking name, and it's a stupid fucking joke, not even worth mentioning. Mimicking the original film, we see Dalton make friends with some local business owners and be very friendly with the people of the Keys. But then after his first night there in town, he learns that the town is pretty gossipy as fuck, because now the next day everyone knows him by name and is greeting him. All of a sudden, because he beat up a few goons and drove them to the fucking hospital, he's a fucking local hero now. Oh! And with this first goon that Dalton encounters, if they were gonna have a guy who looks kind of like Chuck Liddell, why didn't they just try to get Chuck Liddell? They already have a former UFC champion in the film. And this fucking guy is just hilarious. He is one of the most memorable goons from that original squad they first introduced in the movie. He genuinely seems like a very nice guy who is just trying to fit in with his biker friends. And you can actually see on his face that he's like struggling with like his inner demons because he doesn't want to swing on Dalton in the first fight scene of the film. But he genuinely seems like he wants to hold back but has to just for circumstances of maintaining his status in that little biker gang. The hospital car ride scene and patient intake scene was pretty funny. And this leads us to introduce our newest character, Dalton's love interest, the doctor. And just like her predecessor, this doctor has no meat on her bones either. And then the film introduces us to our main villain, which is a spoiled young little white rich cunt who has a huge ego and is going on a huge power trip throughout the whole movie. This kid thinks he's hot shit because his daddy helped build the island or some crap like that. But it's not really that important, but what it does establish is that his father is in jail and still somewhat pulling the strings of the operations going on outside of jail. The film introduces more characters to us as we are introduced to the bouncers that are actually currently working at the Roadhouse. And these guys don't really give off bouncer type vibes. It becomes clear that Dalton has a couple of twinks watching his back. But that's okay. Just as long as they lift with their knees, that's all that Jake Gyllenhaal needs out of them. As the movie progresses, we begin to see Dalton have boat dreams, where he actually seems to be lingering on some thoughts from his traumatic past. I think that this was the coolest tie-in that this movie could have possibly had, with Dalton having a history in the UFC. I actually remember watching the pay-per-view that they used to film Jake Gyllenhaal's entrance for this movie, and that only left me excited and wondering what fucking movie that was going to be used for. Little did I know, it was going to be this one. The Chuck Liddell looking motherfucker from the first goon fight of the film couldn't just let Dalton walk away, and not only tries to run him over with a pickup truck, but he goes to the boat that Dalton is dorming in and tries to shoot him. This dumb-ass whippersnapper fucks everything up, and then ends up going overboard to become some crocodile's meal. But that's not before he spilled the beans of his true intentions of why he was an issue. Some advice for all you villains out there? Shut the fuck up, pew pew, leave! Don't spill the fucking beans that you're ultimately after the Roadhouse! The spoiled little rich bitch of this movie, Ben Brandt, after hearing that his goon became a meal for a crocodile, he begins to panic. But instead of taking a phone call from Daddy in prison, he throws his phone in the fucking ocean! By cold shouldering Prison Daddy, this leads us to the most anticipated part of the movie. The introduction of Knox, aka Conor McGregor, who's portraying a absolute naked psychopath. Prison Daddy essentially contracts Knox to do what his son can't, eradicate Dalton from the Roadhouse as well as destroy the Roadhouse, so they are forced to sell it. That's right, boys. This movie is about fucking real estate. We then snap back to Dalton and the doctor going on an impromptu date, growing closer together, and Dalton's trying to push her away because he doesn't want to endanger her safety or any of that shit. We've seen this all before. Knox shows up to the Keys and basically squats in Prison Daddy's estate, almost like a migrant would in a New York City vacant apartment. But then Ben shows up, the son, and he asks Knox for one more chance to do this the non-violent route, and then gives him his permission to do whatever he wants if that fails. The story jumps back to Dalton as we see Dalton have an encounter with the sheriff and police in town. And it turns out that the sheriff happens to be the doctor's father, and he's corrupt as fuck. The boys in blue begin to abuse their power and beat on Dalton like he's John fucking Rambo or some shit. But that's all put to a stop when the doctor rolls up in a Mini Cooper and bitch slaps Daddy and takes Dalton away. Ben's non-violent route of trying to get Dalton out of the Roadhouse is by going to the Roadhouse and showing him a video of his traumatic past where Dalton actually ended up killing his opponent and friend in the ring of UFC. All Dalton had to do at this point to get this guy out of this fucking movie is text his homeboy Dana White and be like, yo, this guy's got some fucking pirated shit on his phone, come get him.
Federal fucking prison.
This tactic ultimately fails, and Ben is left with no other choice than to let Knox do his job. So Knox goes in, he fucks the bar up, and he also fucks Dalton up. However, the non-corrupt police decide to show up, and they couldn't fully burn down the bar or go through what the ultimate plan was of total destruction. So the final outcome is prolonged for a bit. But what the goons did succeed in was burning down the bookstore, the friends that Dalton made when he first arrived here in the Keys. Seeing the innocent destruction of their business, as well as hearing that both the father and daughter were in the hospital because of this, it clearly pushed Dalton's character way over the edge. And here is where Dalton begins his revenge tour. He begins by going to Prison Daddy's house, and he immediately punches a guy in the throat and breaks his hyoid bone. Dalton spares the little nice guy who's been polite to him throughout the whole movie for an exchange of information. I probably would have been upset if Dalton killed that guy because he genuinely seemed like a nice guy. Dalton then uses this information that he got from the goon to ambush a corrupt police officer who was transporting a large bin of money to Ben early in the morning. All the while, Knox is off chugging coconut milk straight from the nut and driving a stolen Toyota Yaris right into a palm tree and wondering where the fuck everyone's at. I'm surprised that they didn't add a scene where Knox shits his pants, because if we all learned anything from Castaway, it's that
coconut milk's a natural laxative. Some things Gilligan never told us.
The sheriff eventually tracks Dalton down and informs him that his daughter, the doctor, has been taken hostage by Ben on his boat, and Ben wants his money in exchange for his daughter. Seems fishy. So Dalton shows up to the boat without the money and takes one of the most vicious shots to the face by one of the most scrawniest of goons in the movie. Okay, well, not really, but this scene was quite hilarious to see how unfazed Dalton was to this punch. As expected, a bunch of double crossing goes down, and then we see Dalton pull a Walter White as he pulls out his remote starter and starts clicking, trying to explode a bomb that he has hidden on his boat. Eventually, it does blow up, and all hell breaks loose. We now see a rabid Knox approaching the boat with a speedboat, basically playing Cobra Triangle with all the survivors in the water as he speeds by, donking them on the heads. The movie is now beginning to drift into a more cartoony type violence and action scene here, and it's starting to lose its touch as we see Dalton grapple the side of Knox's speeding boat, get on the boat, kick Connor off, and then speed into Ben's boat and somehow jumps onto it at full speed. It's some pretty bad CGI. Now on the boat, a struggle ensues between the doctor and Dalton and fighting Ben, and eventually Dalton and the doctor jump off and the boat speeds into the docks of the roadhouse, sending Ben flying onto the roof. Yeah, Dalton and the doctor swim to shore. Dalton goes into the roadhouse and he eventually fights Ben inside there. And at one point, I thought this film was going to go to a dark place here, where Ben's face was on the stairs. I thought a curb stomp was coming, but nope, the movie didn't deliver that. Nope. And then what do you know? A speeding pickup truck drives straight through the roadhouse, and it's none other than Knox, who managed to swim ashore and steal another vehicle. And here, we have the final fight. As viewers, we've been waiting for this moment the whole movie, and we're more than fucking thrilled that it's here at this point. But what I will give this movie props for is the camera work. Sometimes in the movie, we were going first person, seeing Connor fight you. We were seeing all these tight and close quarter combat shots, and I think the camera work was exceptional. But the one thing that took me out of this fight halfway through it was the fucking piano line.
This piano's out of tune.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Why would you say this? Why was this line in there? The fight seems to go in the direction of Knox, as Knox approaches Dalton to finish him off at one point. But we start to hear some sort of music in the background, and I believe it's Enter the Sandman, which leads me to believe that this right here is the most fucking expensive shot of the whole movie. Due to licensing rights, I bet. But don't quote me on that. I did absolutely no research on this film's financials. In fact, this film didn't even go to theaters. Dalton eventually catches Knox off guard and ends up stabbing him a fuck ton of times. This leads to Dalton winning the fight and being the last man standing. Congrats, happy ending. The sheriff ends up walking in, and they mimic the same style ending that the original Roadhouse has, stating that Dalton should get the hell out of there and that he was never there. Nobody saw shit. And then after all that is said and done, they're sweeping up glass, pulling the car out of the building. Someone walks into the Roadhouse and talks to the Daily Show chick and is like, "Hey, you guys still open?" All that work, all that effort, and the Roadhouse is still serving drinks. We then see Dalton with his bags packed, getting ready to go on that Greyhound bus the fuck out of this town. But not before he says goodbye to his bookstore friends and leaves them a present. The movie has a happy ending, but surprisingly, in the credits, we see Conor McGregor in the same style fashion that he was in the first scene we saw him in, ass naked, walking out of the hospital. Are they trying to make another one of these? Let's get straight to the point. This movie did not need to be called Roadhouse. With a few tweaks to the characters and a few developments and stop replicating a few of the scenes almost beat by beat, we would have a perfectly fine action movie here. But instead, what we have is a movie that's trying to be a remake of something that we did not need to have remade. And that immediately puts viewers off. Because this original movie, most people regard it as a masterpiece. It's made an impact on cinematic history. I firmly believe that if a movie's considered a classic, it stands the test of time and doesn't need a remake or reboot or any of that crap. What Roadhouse 2024 feels like is a simple way to make a quick buck off an existing franchise. But these fuckers didn't even release it in theaters, so I don't even know. What's the point? I mean, shit, they even put little bitch Bob Menery in this film. And that dude fucking reeks of shitty sports casting in Buffalo Wild Wings. How much more did they want to taint the original? This movie had a decent amount of good things in it, but also had a lot riding against it. And it all boils down to the fact that it has the audacity to call itself Roadhouse. A classic that didn't need a reboot, a sequel, none of that shit. And by doing this, it made the fan base very divisive on it. I would give this film a 6 out of 10. Here's some of the things that worked for it, but the list of things that didn't work for it. That fucker's a lot longer. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more Avedon video content down the road. My name is Will Smith, and just remember, if I said anything that might have triggered you, offended you in any way, shape, or form, I'll let Elon take it away from here.
Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself.